Is this your mom? All right, so I can see Dawn Woods on the Zoom. Miss Woods, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am, I can hear you.
All right, thank you. I know you have your camera on. You're unmuted. There are two other individuals on the Zoom. They currently have their cameras off. I believe they're both muted. I would just simply ask that we take one person in turn. You are on the Zoom. It is viewable in the courtroom. I want to acknowledge, ma'am, I did receive what I believe is a written statement that you faxed to the court.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, and then if that is, I'm not sure who joined us at the moment. All right, is that Ms. Edwards? All right, Ms.
Yes.
Edwards, if you could please, I'm gonna have Ms. Woods talk first, and then I'll have you next. If you could keep your camera off and your microphone muted until it's your turn to talk. That way I can give my full attention to Ms. Woods.
Sure.
There we go. Very good. Thank you. All right. So once again, Ms. Woods, I believe you sent in a fax yesterday. Is that right?
No, I believe it was this morning.
Oh, this morning. All right. I have
Yes,
that,
ma'am.
and I've read it. Go ahead. What would you like to tell the court? And thank you for being with us today.
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon. I have two things I would like to tell. One is a written statement, Your Honor, and then I have a poem I would like to read after my statement, if that's permissible. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Mental illness affects everyone. It destroys lives, families, and hurts society. For far too long, it's been a dirty little secret in families that no one wants to talk about. Mental illness is the elephant in the room that so many pretend it's not there. People who suffer from it are often shunned by families and friends, rejected by society, and made fun of, the subject of bad jokes, ridiculed, and judged on YouTube, podcasts, Facebook, and other media posts, used in campaign ads, disrespected, stripped of their dignity. No one cares. No one sees their pain or hears their cries and pleas for help. They are the forgotten ones and viewed by many of not having a place in society. It is no fault of their own that they have become ill and began to change from the person we all knew. Once viewed as fun, loving, and kind, are now the outcasts of society. We say they're what's wrong with society? They're idiots, unfit. They need to be disposed of, thrown out with the rest of the trash. They serve no purpose. The saying, my brother's keeper, doesn't apply to them. And the Bible, in the book of Philippians, chapter 2, verse 4, it says, let each of you not look only to his own interests, but also the interests of others. Mental illness caused them to do the unthinkable. They must be punished. Yes, I agree. There should be some accountability for their actions. But we also must render help. What good is punishment without correction to prevent the act from happening again? In their cases, or many of their cases, treatment, therapy, medication, hospitals, and institutions that specialize in helping those who suffer with mental illness need to be offered. And I believe these places can help those who suffer become mentally well. I believe lawmakers and society as a whole need to recognize mental illness. Mental illness cannot be eradicated with prison bars. Mental illness is going to always be there. It's invasive. With treatment and therapy, medication, and hospitals and institutions that specialize in the treatment of mental illness, it can be controlled. What else can we do as a society to help those who suffer from mental illness? How about showing a little compassion, empathy, and some understanding? Families need to advocate for those who cannot speak for themselves or who struggle to understand what's happening to them. Lawmakers should support by providing resources to individuals so they can get the help they need. Now, I've been dealing with mental illness for over 30 some odd years, and here's my take on it. And I think I have a little insight on it. From the surface, I believe that treatments need to be offered. I believe that if treatment is offered early, when the signs of mental illness first shows, and it's addressed and stayed on top of, instead of let people lagger and fall through the cracks, just maybe there would be less court cases and less people crying because their loved ones was hurt or was injured or killed because someone of mental illness attacked them. Maybe that needs to be done. Treatment needs to be done early and right away and stayed up on, and not let people fall through the crack holes and not be shunned out the door. It's the same. You don't have a mental illness. You're just a bad person and needs to be locked up. Jail is not the only answer. Help, treatment, hospitalization, and medication, it plays a big role in preventing this where we are today if it would have been offered sooner. Now, I have a poem that I have adopted, not just for my son Darrell, but for all the people who suffer from mental illness. And I let this be my theme and some inspiration. And I hope that Darrell will find strength in this poem. I sent it to him. And it's a poem that was written by the late, great Maya Angelou. I don't know if you're familiar with her writings, but she was a brilliant poet. And she wrote this poem back in 1969 for a totally different reason. It was during the racial injustice era, but I believe it applies to those who suffer from mental illness as well. It's called Caged Bird. A free bird leaps on the back of the wind and floats downstream till the current ends, and dips his wing in the orange sun rays and dares to touch the sky. But a caged bird that stalks down his narrow cage can seldom see through his bars of rage. His wings are clipped and his feet are tied, and he opens his throat to sing. The caged bird sings with fearful thrill of things unknown but longed for still, and his tune is heard on the distant hill, for the caged bird sings of freedom. The free bird thinks of another breeze, and the trade winds that when soft winds with soft signs through the trees, and the fat worms waiting on the dawn's bright lawn, and he names the sky his own. But a caged bird stands on the grave of dreams. His shadow shouts on the nightmare scream. Their wings are clipped. Their feet are tied. They open their mouths to sing. The caged bird sings of fearful thrills, of things unknown, but long for still. and its tune is heard on a distant hill. The caged birds sing of freedom. Everyone who suffers from mental illness is caged. All they want is to be free of their illness and become mentally well. I believe as a society we have an obligation to help those become mentally well with treatment, medication, hospitalization, or sent to an institution where they can get the intense help. And if they have to stay for the rest of their lives away from society, at least they are getting the help they need to become mentally well. We are our brother's keepers. And I also want to say to the families who lost loved ones and those who suffered injuries, that I know their pain, and I pray that the Lord would continue to comfort and heal each of them. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you, Ms. Woods, and I should have said this earlier. I have 3 monitors in front of me, and the monitor that I'm pointing at right now is the monitor that the Zoom shows up, so that's why I look like I'm turned away, but I'm actually watching you.
Thank you, ma'am.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Then I'll turn next to Mary Edwards. If you want to turn your camera on and unmute, and then Ms. Woods, if you would.
Yes, ma'am.
If you want to take her camera.
Good afternoon.
And I should say for the record that obviously